Matt Thomas, King Unique, back with the Arturia Mini V, looking at the Minimoogs with Sonic Academy. We're going to look at the modifiers now. So we've tracked the sound, it's controlled the pitch into the oscillator bank to create the sound, into the mix to balance the sound up, into the modifiers to modify the sound. And the first thing we can do is filter the sound. The Minimoog has a low-pass filter, a 24 decibel ladder filter, which sounds like this. You've got a cut-off frequency control that cuts off the frequencies above, so the low frequencies pass, thus a low-pass filter. You can see the hertz readout there for what frequency we're cutting. So here, everything below 600 hertz is audible, everything above is gone. It's not quite that mathematically that sharp, but that's the idea. There's a 3K now. Okay. So very simple, straightforward, low-pass filter. We've got emphasis, which is another word for resonance, or Q, which means that at the cutoff point, the filter emphasizes those frequencies, creating a sort of tonal, squelchy character at the cutoff edge. If I push this all the way up to 10, eventually we get an actual note being created by that extra emphasis. So it's filtering and generating a tone at the same time. The amount of contour control here is a depth for this envelope. We've got an attack, decay, sustain envelope. You may have encountered ADSR envelopes. This is an ADS. It is actually an ADSR envelope, but the Minimoog doesn't have a separate release control. So release and decay are both set by decay time. So I'm going to use this envelope to open and close the cutoff frequency. To do that, I'm going to put the attack. We've got a couple of seconds of attack and a couple of seconds of decay. Bring the sustain down to 0. So this envelope now is going to rise up for 2 seconds, decay back for 2 seconds, and we'll hear that open and close the cutoff frequency. That will be achieved by using this amount of contour. This envelope is referred to as a filter contour. This is a loudness contour. Contour envelope is your choice. This is just the original Moog terminology. So the amount of the contour is then sent to the cutoff frequency. So without it, nice flat sound. With it, okay, so there we go. That was a sweep up and a sweep down. Now that doesn't need to be quite so steep. We can make a less dramatic sweep. Okay, that's how the filter section works. You can obviously change the envelope for different effects. Now, as mentioned before, we have a filter modulation switch. I'll come back, as I say, at the end and do the whole modulation just to finish up. We have keyboard control, 2 switches here. Now, they are both doing the same thing. You may have come across the keyboard control of the filter. This is the thing which allows the top end of the keys to be brighter in the filter setting than the bottom end, because often bass sounds can be quite sort of muted. Top end sound needs to be brighter. So as I play a deep sound currently, let's get, there you go, quite a deep sound there. Okay, quite muted. Top end's equally muted. However, if I click one of these on, bottom end, top end, a bit brighter. If I put them both on, so basically these switches both do the same thing. You can put either one or both on, put both on for the maximum effect. And it simply means that the lower notes of the keyboard will have a deeper frequency setting and the higher notes a sharper frequency setting. Without it. Okay. We have another contour section here, loudness contour. And this is simply the volume of the synth. So I can have, as we have currently, an instant attack, full sustain, very short decay, or we can have a slow attack, even slower. And a long release, because the decay, as I say, is also a release. So as I let the note go, we get 2 seconds of the sound dying away. Let's get some filter contour going on as well. Deeper sound, there you go. So you can see these 2 contours in the filter section are really, as it suggests, modifying the sound quite a lot. If I take the contour off the filter, take the loudness contour back to instantly on and full volume, we're just left with. So that takes us to the output section. I'll make this sound a bit clearer. We have a volume control. We have an A440 tuner. In case you needed a reference, this is a very kind of correct and historically nice to have it on here, but really not going to use it much. The unison, the polyphonic, and the voice detuner are all to do with using this Minimoog polyphonically. We will come back and look at Arturio's extras later. I'll skip over them now. That's the basics of the Minimoog. So I'm going to run back as promised now and look at how we actually use the modulation section. We've seen how the synth is wired together. So let's modulate some of these sounds. So if I want to use oscillator 3 to modulate the filter, let's start with that, okay? So first of all, I'm going to say, yeah, dial it round to just oscillator 3, and I'm going to click on for filter modulation. I'm going to leave oscillator modulation off. I don't want the pitch affected, but I do want the filter to be opened and closed. So let's see what we get straight away. Okay, not a great deal, because down here is a mod wheel. Now this is the depth of the modulation, okay? This is the source. These are the destinations where it's going to go. Unless you push the mod wheel up, nothing's going to happen. Okay, and there we go. There's some rather interesting modulation straight away. Now you can hear the modulation. It's getting slower on the deeper notes, that jigga 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 jigga. On the higher notes, it's so fast, real fast, you know, machine-like, instant repeat. That's because we're using oscillator 3 as the modulation source, but it's still changing pitch with the keyboard. So I'm going to take it off that setting, and I'm also going to set it to be a very slow LFO for us. And there we go, we've now got the filter being opened and closed with that square wave. So if I change the pitch of oscillator 3, you'll see this get faster. But because I've disengaged it from the keyboard, it doesn't matter what note I play, it's always the same speed of modulation. And we can change the waveform. Bit of white noise in there. Nice. So, oscillator 3, as I say, we can work with it in the audio range, you get some very interesting sounds as well. Which is mad groovy stuff. This is why the Minimoog is so sort of popular. It's very easy to kind of create lovely, melodic, simple, tuneful sounds with it, but it can also be pushed into these really crazy areas. And if it's too much, don't forget you've got a depth control. And it just adds colour to a sound. Now we're still hearing oscillator 3 playing in the patch. If I want to get rid of that, I can of course turn it off. So it's still modulating, it's still being sent through this modulation switch to affect the pitches of the cutoff of the filter. But we're not hearing it as part of the sound. As I said before, we can also use the noise as the modulation source. So if let's bring this back down to a slower sound so it's very clear. So there's the oscillator as a modulation source. And if I roll it round, we'll be using white noise to modulate the filter. And that's not the same as feeding white noise into the filter, which is done at the mixer. We just get white noise and add it to the oscillators. This is using white noise as sort of constant, endlessly changing load of voltage ultimately to jump the filter cutoff around. It still creates a kind of white noise-esque sound, just to confuse things even further. But it isn't the same as putting white noise into the filter. It's sweeping the filter around using white noise, and the result is this. So if you listen, you can hear there is a sort of like a white noise element, but also you can hear the filter is ever so slightly being like moved around. If I put the emphasis up, you hear it clearer. You can hear that sort of, and that's the noise moving the frequency randomly up and down. There you go. And I can balance between the two. You can move oscillator 3 back into the audio territory. You get really strange stuff. Now, so far, that's just using the modulation source to affect the filter. I can turn that off. There we go, nice static filter again. I can use those same sources to affect the pitch of oscillators 1 and 2. Let's do that. Straight away. So there we are, low depth. Pretty sexy stuff. And I can get straightforward vibrato tricks by moving back down to the low frequency. There's a more musical use of the same modulation routines. And we can have it on the filter and the oscillators. And we can, of course, get more interesting and spacey. And that's the Minimoog. It's as simple as that. There's a pitch bend wheel which you can turn on and then set the range, and then you can, just like every other synth with a pitch bend wheel ever, although of course this was the first. Above the pitch bend wheel, there are these 3 switches. We looked at the glide on earlier, which controls whether this glide knob has any effect. Legato on controls whether glide occurs between just notes held overlapping. So I'm still holding the first note as I play the second. That's a legato if I release the first note. So I'll demonstrate this. Let's get rid of the modulation for a second. Boom. Okay, this is legato. I'm still holding the first note. This isn't legato. Okay, there's a gap between notes, yeah? With legato on, if I've got the glide on, then what will happen is when I hold notes overlapping, they'll do the glide slide, yeah? If they're not overlapping, no slide. If I turn legato off, even when they're not overlapping, they still slide. And last of all, we've got a decay on setting. So if I had like a long decay on this sound, if I turn decay off, regardless of where the decay setting is, you hear that the sound is just instantly released. Okay. So that, in a nutshell, is the Minimoog. We're going to look at the alternative software versions that are out there. And then at the end, I'm going to have a quick play with Sonic Academy's Anna software and see if I can bring out some of the Moog magic using that synth. Okay, on we go.
Thanks everybody for watching, commenting and indeed liking. We really do appreciate all the support we get here on our Sonic Academy YouTube channel. So if you found this video super useful, please, we'd love you to hit the subscribe button. We update the YouTube channel every week with new content. And if you want to watch some more relevant content, just click on the videos beside me.